Mark Schulman. I'm the president of Presidio Graduate School, and welcome. It's so great to see this variety of folks from all facets of our life as Presidians, and this is going to be a wonderful event. It's called Become the Solution, How Presidians Impact Change. Very pertinent topic, especially these days, a lot of us feel. And you're going to learn a number of the ways in which this happens. This is a special event in the sense that it's the first time that we've welcomed alums from both Pinchot, BGI, and Presidio. I was trying to remember, is someone from Pinchot here? Are you Pinchotians?
Pinchoters.
Say it again?
Pinchoters.
Pinchoters?
BGIers.
Or BGIers?
I don't know
Okay.
if we ever came up with a define.
Never did. All right.
You couldn't agree.
How strange, you couldn't agree. Yeah. The folks from Pinchot, the folks from BGI, and the folks from Presidio, all of whom are part of the same Presidio family now. So welcome. We have several people who have, at least one come from Seattle and maybe others, and thank you so much for joining us. So this is a community. I probably don't have to say that because everybody knows what this means. It must mean that there's some community going on. It's a really, in Martin Luther King's terms, a beloved community. I think it's fair to say that. We don't need to be embarrassed by that. We are a beloved community. And our goal is to extend that community to the rest of the world. That's not too ambitious, right? We can do it. But we're starting with ourselves now, here in this room, in this city, to really try to talk about what it all means to do that. And that's the purpose of this evening tonight, to engage in a dialogue with our wonderful panelists, who you'll have introduced in a moment. But it isn't about them, and they know this. It's about you, and it's about the future Presidians. I know at least one person in this room. Tyler, how old is your kid? 13 months. So it's a little time before Tyler and anyone else who has someone that young is going to present us with a future Presidian, but we're going to do that because we're going to be around and we're going to continue to do the things that we do well, and we're going to do them even better, and we're going to learn new ways of doing things. So that's what this is all about. It's not the end of a conversation, it's really the beginning of a conversation, and that is really our goal in terms of a Presidian approach to the world, to become the solution. So it's the first time, as I mentioned, that we have graduates, the first time we were bringing together the entire community. We have graduates of the San Francisco campus, we have a student from the San Francisco campus, and a graduate of the Seattle campus. And so it'll give us a chance to really see how there are so many connections among us, and that's what we want to do. Nils, who is our moderator this evening, will introduce our panelists. But before he does that, as soon as I finish, I'd like to ask Nils to say a little bit about his own work. He is himself an alumnus, and he's got an impressive record since being an alumnus, so we're glad that he's part of our family. He's also been a faculty member at PGS, and I'll let him say something about that. It's necessary, I guess obligatory, I have to say, for me to mention something which is not the happiest thing, but it really is part of our legacy. Many of you know the name, if not, didn't know the person, Dick Gray. Dick, along with Steve Swig, would you raise your hand, Steve? Steve and Dick were, without them we wouldn't be here. That's the easiest way to say it. They started the Presidio School of Management, it was at the time, I believe. It started off. Yeah, Presidio World College. We don't even talk about that part, but But it was the World College, and then the Presidio School of Management, and then the Presidio Graduate School. And Dick passed away about 11 days ago. Mm-hmm. So this is our first time being together since that happened. And before we go forward, I'd just like us to have a moment of silence for Dick. Thank you. One thing about Dick, for those of you who met him, he was a graceful man, a man full of grace. He also could make trouble when he needed to, and that sort of defines us. We live in a state of grace, but we make trouble when we need to. So thank you for joining us, and make some trouble.
Thank you, Mark. We're truly grateful for your visionary leadership, so thank you very much. And I really appreciate you mentioning, Dick's name. I think it's very appropriate that we mention his name in the same time talking about a conversation around impact and Presidio. And I think can all agree in all the work that we do stand on the shoulder of giants, and he certainly was a giant for our school and the field in general. So thank you. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Nils Moe. I am first and foremost #1 fan of Presidio. I'm a graduate from cohort 3. I don't think I'm the earliest cohort here. Nick, 1? 2. Okay, almost had it covered. But yeah, huge fan, graduate of cohort 3. And as Mark mentioned, taught the effective management, communication, and action class, co-taught that class for 8 years. I can't believe it. This was the first year that I haven't taught the course, and the first couple of residencies was going through some serious withdrawal. Call my co-teacher and ask him for the play-by-play, and really miss it. But it's so good to be part of this growing community with lots of new faces in the room, so that's amazing. And Presidio launched me into my first career after grad school, in that I was doing an experiential learning class in Steve Crane's finance class on the PACE Solar Financing program, led to a job as the climate advisor for the mayor for the city of Berkeley, where I spent over 6 years helping to create and implement their climate action plan. But that was the springboard into my current role today, where I've been for the last 3 years. I can't believe it's been that long. Working as the managing director for the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. It's a mouthful, but USDN, we're a network of sustainable cities. We're up to 165 sustainable cities across the US and Canada, and now integrating some international cities like Copenhagen and Oslo and Sydney and others into our mix. And our sustainability directors and specialist staff, they're our key members, and they're dedicated every day to creating that impact of creating healthier, more inclusive, and more prosperous communities. And I get to be around these inspiring people on a daily basis, which is it's mind-blowing to me. But yeah, today we're here to talk about impact and really drill into this notion of impact in our daily work. And the dictionary defines impact as the influence or the effect on someone or something. And today we've got 3 amazing panelists who do that on a daily basis. They create that positive effect, that positive influence on the world around them. So I'm going to give you a little tidbit of who these folks are, and you probably know most of them, but then we'll turn the mic over to them so that they can talk a little more about their work. So at the end, we have David Groves, who was appointed in February 2016 to serve as the Senior Policy Advisor in the White House Council on Environmental Quality. And David led White House efforts to increase private capital investment in programs that restore and conserve natural resources in America. And David received his MBA from Presidio Grad School in 2012. And then next down the line, we have Desiree Williams-Rajee is the equity specialist for the city of Portland, who led an effort to authentically engage organizations that serve communities of color and low-income populations through a formal learning partnership. Desiree was honored in July 2016 as a White House Champion of Change for Climate Equity. Maybe you guys ran into each other then? No? So Desiree is a graduate of the Bainbridge Graduate Institute, BGIers in the house, which later became Pinchot University, and we know that they're all part of the Presidio family now, so we're so excited about that. And I will say I'm very excited. Desiree is also a member of USDN, so we get to work together a lot, which is wonderful. And then last but not least, Andrea Prebys-Williams is a candidate for the MBA and MPA dual degree at Presidio Graduate School. Yes. Working on those public-private partnerships. Yes, we need help there. But that's part of what she does. She's also the coordinator for special projects and administration for Professional and Technical Engineers Local 21. Developed a lot of interesting and coordinated interesting projects like the Unsung Heroes campaign, the Steward program, and the Next Gen organizing. And She also survived my EMCA class, which speaks volumes to her character, I think. So I'm going to pass the mic in just a second. We've asked the panelists at first just to offer an insight into their journey. Among other things, perhaps they can touch on, how did they get to where they are? What's a day in the life look like where they are, where they have been? And what's exciting about your work? And then we'll drill into a few moderator questions, but then I'm excited we'll turn it over and do some Q&A from the audience and really drill into some important conversation here. So, excited for this. I'm going to pass the mic to David and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks, Nils. If you guys have trouble hearing me in the back, just, throw something at me. So, as Nils said, I was senior policy advisor, important to say, former senior policy advisor in the White House, because while I was there past the inauguration, the vast majority of my time was spent in the last administration. I want to make that very clear. Started in February of 2016. So I was just there for the last year of the 8 years that President Obama had. And when I started, I was thinking, well, maybe it's kind of, lame ducky and all that kind of stuff, and maybe there wouldn't be as much going on. But the president advised everyone in the White House to run through the tape. That was sort of the expression that he used. And the reality is, natural resources stuff, because that was what I was focused on, doesn't really pull that well. It's usually clean water, clean air is pretty low on the list. Climate change, amazingly, still hasn't really made a very high in the polls among Americans as a major concern. And so basically, it's just it's hard to get traction for this kind of stuff until maybe you're in the last year of a two-term president who then wants to cement an environmental legacy. And so what that meant was we were incredibly active in doing tons of really exciting things, really aggressive things to try to sort of cement an environmental legacy. And so, very long way of saying that it was a pretty amazing time to be there in the White House working on environmental stuff specifically. So one of the things that people always ask, or one of the first things that people generally ask when they hear that I was that I had this amazing opportunity was what was my proximity to the president, and I was, as senior policy advisor, I was 3 rungs below the president. I reported to the director of the Office of Social Innovation, who reported to Cecilia Munoz, the director of the Domestic Policy Council, who reported to the president of the United States. So that sounds pretty good, right? 3 rungs below the president. But the White House bureaucracy gets pretty horizontal pretty quickly. And so there was a lot of us 3 rungs below the president. What that means is that I did not, unfortunately, have any meetings in the Oval, which would have been pretty amazing. That was sort of what I was going for, but it just did not happen. I did have some meetings in the Roosevelt Room, which is directly across from the Oval, but not with the president, unfortunately. But some of the other cool stuff is I got to tour Air Force One, and the highlight of that was poking my head within the presidential suite in the bathroom and seeing the toothbrushes that the president and first lady use when they travel. Some of my colleagues, we thought about sort of yanking them and putting them in our pockets, but didn't figure Secret Service would look too kindly on that. Also went to Camp David and got to play on the same pool table that the president uses when he's there, which is, I'm a big billiards junkie, so that was pretty awesome. And then the turkey pardoning ceremony was kind of a hit because everyone in the White House mocks it as this ridiculous event, because it is. But going there was pretty funny, just being able to be in the Rose Garden while the president was there, sort of making all these terrible puns about turkeys and Thanksgiving and everything. And it'll be interesting to see sort of how the new administration does, because they're very outside of the realm of normalcy, I would say. So my guess is maybe Steve Bannon will come in and wring the turkey's neck in front of everyone. I don't know. It just seems like in his character. And then apropos of it being March, I am in a pool with the president, an NCAA tournament pool, which is very fun. Last year, I actually finished higher than the president. This year, I picked Villanova to win it all. So I am, for those of you following the tournament, I'm not doing quite as well. Sorry, Mike, for putting the stink on your team by picking them. So just to take a step back, how did I get there? There's a direct line basically from a Presidio class project to me being senior policy advisor in the White House. And it seems pretty crazy, but I'll just sort of quickly tell the story. Where essentially in fourth semester capital markets, we were learning about this new innovative transaction called a social impact bond that was being used to attract private capital to address prison recidivism issues in the UK. And none other than Eric Sitnarski came up to me at some point after that lesson and said, "Hey, what do you think about trying to figure out how to apply this in a natural resources conservation context?" And Eric and I are both very much tree huggers, so it seemed like a natural fit with where our passions are. And so we sat down with Scott Fullweiler and Vanessa Fry, the professors at the time, and sort of did a brainstorm and figured out that forest restoration, specifically restoring a forest to its natural and healthy state to reduce the risk of future catastrophic wildfire, would be an appropriate application of this model. And so we ended up pursuing that as a semester-long team project. And in giving our presentation at the end, we were basically asked. Well, up to that point, I thought it was more or less an academic exercise. But then someone in the audience asked, "Hey, this is a really good idea. Have you thought about pursuing this beyond Presidio?" And it wasn't really until then that I had. And so a little light bulb went off. And then I went around and I pitched this idea to a bunch of different organizations. And they all said, "Well, we don't have a big pile of money to just hire you. But if you can go out and find the funding for yourself, we can bring you on at that point." And I very naively said, "If I can find the funding, I'll hire myself," not realizing how kind of naive that statement was in the idea of trying to attract philanthropic capital to a previously non-existent nonprofit with no track record of success or anything like that. But anyway, over the next year and a half or so, I was working during the day as a consultant to pay the bills, but trying to develop this nonprofit nights and weekends. Through that process, I ended up creating a feasibility study with a financial model and submitting that as a response to a request for information that the Department of the Treasury released, basically asking the public, how should we spend a $400 million pay for success incentive fund, is what they were calling it, that they were putting in the FY15 federal budget. And so I submitted this feasibility study, thinking that would just go off into the ether of the federal government, and that would be that. And about only 2 weeks later, I get a call from a senior policy advisor in the White House saying, "Hey, this is a good idea. He sent me an email. He said, hey, can we have a conversation?" And then that sort of started this relationship with the senior policy advisory, connected me to some senior folks in the Forest Service and the Department of Agriculture and the White House Office of Management and Budget, helped legitimize the project. And then we basically, through the development of this relationship, we just had a lot of back and forth over the next, say, 12 to 18 months. Then all of a sudden he calls me, and what I thought would be just a normal check-in, and he says, "I just got hired. I just got a title bump to be the director in the Office of Social Innovation where I am. Do you know of anyone that can fill this position, or that can backfill my old position?" And I said, I pitched a couple of people, and then he said, "Well, actually, I was thinking of you." And there was dead silence, because my first thought was, "Wow, what an honor to even be considered for this position." And then number two was, I'm not qualified. Like, who does he think I am? But the reality is the breadth of a portfolio, of one's portfolio in this type of position is it's so vast that really there's very few people that actually are truly qualified to be in this type of position. And so I spent most of the first few months just reading academic journals and reports and all kinds of stuff. And And so we, anyway, so what I ended up basically becoming was and this wasn't my formal title, but my de facto title was sort of White House lead on conservation finance. And so what that meant was trying to figure out ways to affect and change federal policy to incentivize more use of private capital to solve natural resources challenges. And that was, everything from increasing energy efficiency programs in the residential building stock to increasing restoration of endangered species habitat, restoration of wetlands and streams, and on and on. Water quality, credit trading markets. It was pretty broad, and as I said, lots of reading of reports, lots of late night sort of reading briefing memos and all kinds of stuff like that. So it was a pretty unique experience. I guess the one thing that I would just also say, because it can get a little confusing, sort of what the structure of the White House is that there's a bunch of components in the White House. That the head of each component is essentially the chief advisor to the president on that particular issue. So within the Council on Environmental Quality, which is where I was, the head of the Council on Environmental Quality, Christy Goldfuss, was the chief climate and sort of natural resources advisor to the president. John Holdren would be, as the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, was the chief science advisor to the president. So it's sort of worth throwing in sort of this unique structure so people understand sort of where it sits, because it can get very very, very confusing very quickly, and the alphabet soup of Washington D.C. is just sort of out of control. So with that, I'll sort of stop rambling a little bit, and I guess we'll do questions from the audience at the end, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me give you one follow-up, David. Thank you. I know your story has been embargoed, and we've been waiting to hear about this for a while. Would have been super cool if you pulled out that toothbrush in the middle of that. That would have been a good prop for the moment, even if it wasn't their toothbrush. 90 seconds or less, the pay for success model. I hear from our city members, right? Lots of challenges out there, but the financing piece is a universal cross-cutting challenge. Can you give us sort of just the snippet, high level? What's pay for success, and is there hope in that approach?
Yeah, so pay for success is essentially the idea that municipal leaders of states, public policymakers, leaders of municipalities, leaders of utilities they're not just risk averse, they're essentially risk intolerant. They're very unwilling to invest in innovative programs that aren't completely well proven. And so they will oftentimes basically pay for some project that is the status quo, even if it's way more expensive, as long as the error bar is very small. If the error bar grows at all, they are willing to pay a lot more, or they're willing to pay a lot more for something that is less risky. And so pay for success fundamentally sort of gets over that hump of the very risk averse and risk intolerant municipal and utility leaders by outsourcing the risk of a new and innovative idea from basically taxpayers or ratepayers in the case of a utility onto private investors, which are much more risk tolerant. They have to pay they being the municipalities or utilities have to pay a premium on their capital, because they're basically paying them to take on that risk. And so it's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet type of financing, but what it can do is it can basically move forward an innovative idea, whether it's a program to reduce prison recidivism, as we've seen, to increase early childhood education, to invest more in green infrastructure, for example. So there's lots of opportunities where it can be applied, but it's fundamentally a shifting of risk.
Great.
Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah. Thank you, David. And we can drill into that maybe a little later in the Q&A. But I do want to pass the mic to Desiree and hear a little bit about her journey.
Thanks, Nils. Thank you for having me here, and it's exciting to be a part of a joint event between BGI, Show, and Presidio, and now being one happy family, and it's been nice to have a little bit of a reunion with some of my old classmates, so thank you for that, and I really appreciate being here. So my journey coming to this amazing school and community, I think I decided in 2005 I was going to BGI because I read a description. I was like, I'm going there. So it was just a matter of time. It's one of those things, I think, where you read something and you're connected to that mission and purpose, and it's just a matter of how, not if. So it was in 2007 that I actually applied, got into the school, but had to defer because my husband decided to go to graduate school at the same time. And so I went from a part-time job and actually had my second child as well, and decided I needed a full-time job to help support him through school for the first year. And so I deferred enrollment, didn't actually start until 2008. Funny thing was I was working full-time, still had 2 kids, and now was going to school and thought that was going to work out totally fine. Well, because I'd actually had my first son in my first graduate program. I was like, I did it once, pretty sure I can do it again. Damn near killed me, but don't totally recommend that anymore. I think it really was a little bit crazy. But it was totally worth it. And I would never take back the experience that I had because it was life-changing. So in 2008, started the program, and my purpose for going to the program is kind of funny because my first graduate program was in international development, and my focus was on environmental sustainability and development planning. In my application letter, I said I want to open my own business, and the dean was like, so why are you coming here? Why are you not in business school? I said, oh, that's coming. Just wait. I just want to understand the landscape of world politics first, but my business is coming, just not right now. So in 2008, it was my next step to attend business school. And my goals had shifted, and I wanted to attend business school for a really specific purpose. I was focused on environmental sustainability, wanted to activate that, but wanted to see how minority entrepreneurs could be a part of green business, because it was something that I observed. I didn't want Black folks, brown folks to be left behind. And what I saw was the next wave of business. And so I felt like if I went to BGI, I could learn what business folks know and be able to bring that back to my community and teach others so that they would be able to not be left behind. So my purpose in going to BGI really was this sort of like social justice purpose. Like I want to extend knowledge and to understand this, because even though I'm focused on environmental sustainability, it was really in terms of a development context. I didn't understand how business really worked. I didn't have entrepreneurs in my family at the time, so I wanted to understand that. It felt scary, it felt risky, it felt really risky, but it's something that I wanted to do. So I was, so the full-time job I had, I actually really hated it, and after going to orientation in Channel Rock, which was, 5 days, I think it was 5 days, 5, 6, whatever, it felt like a year of transformation for me, because when I came back, the world would look completely different, and I quit my job because I was like, I can't deal with poor management anymore, because now I understand that there's something completely different in how you can operate and run your business, and I just I could not stand being in my job. It was soul killing. So I decided I was going to quit my job, and I was going to take a risk. I was going to invest in myself. I was actually going to not only go to school full-time, be a full-time parent of 2, I was also going to start my own business. That seemed like also a grand idea. No, not so much. So I had applied to a job at the city of Portland. At the same time, it was like right before I left for orientation, I applied to this job. And decided, it'd be a good opportunity. And then when I quit my job, I think it was like 3 days after I quit my job, I got a call for an interview. And so I was like, well, this is pretty cool. So the job was doing outreach on sustainability to low-income folks and folks of color to connect them to resources that the city had. And I had been doing this as a volunteer, organizing environmental professionals of color, which is now a national network of professionals of color in the environmental movement. So, I was like, hey, I can actually get paid for doing what I do on my volunteer time. Not so bad, probably won't have to think too hard. Go into graduate school, it could work out. Plus, better benefits. So not going to do my own business at this time. I'm just going to, go to school, do this gig, and see how it works. So got to BGI, and it was nothing that I had thought it was going to be. The very first thing, I think it was the orientation, this idea of leadership and personal development. Honestly, I was like, this sounds like therapy. My family doesn't really do therapy. Not really sure what they're trying to do. They're trying to I was totally uncomfortable with this whole curriculum of leadership and personal development. And that to me was the most profound and most life-changing aspect of BGI. And I would never take that back for anything because it shifted the way that I saw the world. And so I understand why it was the requirement, the 1 credit requirement that we must take. And I wish it was a requirement for everyone in the world to take because it is what we fundamentally need to understand ourselves and how we change ourselves in order to be able to change others. And so it was those lessons of that hard, self-reflective look of really what do I want to do, who am I, right? And who do I want to become? And I think that is foundational to what I was able to do. So kind of fast forward 3 years at BGI, having this amazing, amazing experience. And as I was transitioning out of BGI, graduation starting to come closer, I'm thinking, well, what's my next move? Because here I was working full-time and in school full-time. If I don't have school full-time, what's my next move? Because my job is going to be boring. I'm used to a lot of go, go, go. So in 2011, we had some interesting things going on at the city. We were doing a strategic plan, and I could talk more about it later, but we had established an equity framework for the city, which was a pretty profound thing to do. And as part of that, we're going to establish an Office of Equity and Human Rights, and got engaged in the creation committee for that. And I started to like that a lot. And I started to think, I can't do this outreach thing anymore. I need to be in equity. I need to be in racial equity work in government. And so I gave my boss these ultimatums. I was like, I'm going to go in 3 months. I have 3 months to find another job, to do something else in the city that I'm really excited about. I'm going to go. And in 3 months, a job opened up. It happened to be the current job. And it looked rather familiar in that I had been asked what would be my ideal position, and I had written up what my ideal position would look like. And it turned out to be that job. And so went through the process, and they created what is the equity specialist position, which is focusing. So my department is the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for the city of Portland. We do climate work, we do climate policy, we do sustainable business work, we do long-range planning. And so this position was designed to create and support the application of a racial equity lens to the work of long-range planning in a city and to climate planning. So to me, this is a dream job. And I get into it, and it's so funny because having gone to BGI, how many of you read Leading Change for Sustainability by Bob Doppelt? This book, do you guys remember this book? It's a blue book. I carried that around with me for literally a year because there's a diagram in there on how to facilitate a change initiative. And I loved that book. I mean, I literally loved that book in school. And what I did in my head was replace Leading Change for Sustainability, change the word sustainability to Leading Change for Equity. Book still applies. So just in case you ever want to do this, just take that book and replace sustainability with equity, and you got your key for success. So it is a change program, right? So equity in government was not designed to be racially equitable. In fact, it was designed to be the complete opposite. And so the work that I do is changing the culture of government, which BGI prepared me to do, right? And so it started with this internal personal change and has been expanded and extended to how do I change an organization? And really, in truth, I look at that as organizations are like people. They have a personality, they have personality quirks, they are also complicated systems. And so if you're trying to change an organization, and really, BGA taught me that, you have to think about what the business case for change is, right? What's in its own personal best interest, and how do you coax that along, not to create defenses, but rather to create, eagerness and appreciation and desire to be something better and to be something new. So BGI is fundamental to the work that I do, fundamental to who I am, and fundamental to the work of even equity in government, which is now becoming like a thing. And I was a part of it where it was quite a thing. I just have so much appreciation. That's also BGI, Presidio thing, I'm sure. How much appreciation I bring from the gifts that I was given in my learning process. And so yeah, I'm very thankful for that. Thankful.
Awesome. Thank you, Desiree. There's a trend forming here, right? Dream it and it will come. You know, it's really powerful, really amazing. I want to drill into something that you talked a little bit about. You know, and Desiree in our network is a rock star change agent. And I remember in I think it was Memphis, right, where I first heard this Portland has this position, this climate equity specialist, which blew my mind. And you were honored at the White House for your work in integrating equity into Portland's climate action plan, which at the time was the first, and now we're seeing the ripple effects. So yeah, we get climate change, we get GHG, but what's climate equity? What does it look like? It's unfair to give you 90 seconds to do that, but let's start the conversation and then we can continue.
Right, 90 seconds. Climate equity. Well, we basically took the approach that, the root causes, we're all systems people here, but the root causes of climate change and racial injustice are the same root causes. And so if we're going to address climate change, we really can't not address racial inequity or social inequity. We must look at these root causes. We must look at what's going on in our capitalist system, our economic systems that are disincentivizing social well-being, right? And so it was basically tying these two things to say that we have to take a systemic approach with institutional racism as being connected to climate change. And so gentrification being a great example of a symptom of these combined problems where you have communities that are being pushed out into the outer edges of cities, which is actually increasing their climate burden. And so you're shifting the burden of climate onto the communities that have the least ability to be able to deal with that change. Meanwhile, we're investing all sorts of dollars in green infrastructure for wealthier communities because of this transition. But now you have people who are more dependent on cars, right? And we're not giving them the infrastructure to have options or alternatives. And so just by putting green investments into the center of the city doesn't reduce our net carbon impact. And so it's saying, let's look at that whole system and not shift the burden onto the poor and pretend that just because we did this thing on the inner city or just because Portland is green, that means that we have a net actual carbon benefit. So yeah, it's really the systemic approach to carbon emission reduction at the local municipal level.
Thanks, Desiree. Last but not least, Andrea, tell us your story.
Sure. So I'm a current dual MPA and MBA student, and I'm really honored to be a part of this panel and talk a little bit about how a union organizer ends up at business school. So a little bit about where I'm from. I grew up in a small working class town up in Alaska. My father was a public school teacher and my mom was a nurse. So growing up in a place like Seward, Alaska with a population of less than 3,000 didn't really prepare me in an academic sense for going to college. There weren't many AP classes and folks weren't on paths to getting advanced degrees. But one of the things it really did prepare me for was life. When I think about one of the main reasons that I decided to go to graduate school, especially one that focuses on sustainability, it goes back to growing up and being surrounded by the beauty of the Alaskan wilderness and the investment that people had in the community. So one of the things, that I learned from a young age was if there was a car on the side of the road with a flat tire, you would stop and help. If our neighbor's dog had a run-in with a porcupine, and that happened way more than one time, you'd assist. And if you caught more fish or if you had more vegetables in your garden, you shared. So the world that I want to help create is really centered on how we show up in our community. And I feel so fortunate that that was one of those lessons that I learned as a young child. when I went to undergrad, I started getting really involved in student organizing. And organizing is about bringing people together. It's about building trust. It's about a collective vision to really move mountains, but knowing you're going to do it stone by stone. So it's uncomfortable work, it's hard work, it forces you to be really vulnerable, and it's necessary work. After I graduated from my undergrad, I had the opportunity to attend a summer-long workshop called Challenging White Supremacy. And it was geared towards white social justice activists that were involved in movement work. And it was really the responsibility of white social justice activists to become principled and effective anti-racist organizers in both acknowledging my privilege, our privilege, and working for racial justice. After that, I got involved in economic justice work. We've seen this, and Desiree, you kind of touched on this devastating shift of the importance of being part of an integrative community. Instead of knowing our neighbors, our community, our colleagues, there's such a focus on individuals. So moving from the we to the I. And I think because of this, we see people are deprived. They're deprived of the connection that our bodies, our minds, our hearts crave. And we can talk about all the reasons that this exists, from capitalism, from people working too many hours, from a myriad of various other reasons. But organizing is really about challenging that. It's about addressing that. One of the things when I was organizing hospitals, it could be any institution, but one of the things we would say is a hospital is like a city. It had all the various systems of oppression, and it also had privilege in those same ways. You'd have, the administration to the doctors to the nurses on down the ladder, right? And even the way that departments were staffed was often racially segregated. So when we were organizing, we would be able to connect departments, connect people based on similarities. And it was about listening, it was about building, about the concerns and the desires of the people that worked there. So this was really about addressing and challenging the current, the status quo that was focused on keeping people divided, whether it was by department, whether it was by floor, whether it was all those different ways. This was done through workplace actions. Sometimes we would work with politicians, sometimes it was policy change, sometimes it was filing legal actions, but it was always about the collective action. And it was always premised on we're stronger when we're together. Well, my work has changed quite a bit. Once an organizer, always an organizer. I now work as a coordinator for special projects at Professional and Technical Engineers. And we're a public sector union. We represent engineers, IT folks, kind of like high-level folks for various municipalities throughout the Bay Area. My primary responsibility has been creating and implementing a program that is kind of two-prong approach for our members. It's a formal curriculum, but then it's also this mentorship program. So people are getting the skills and then the experience to really become workplace leaders. And we have 80 people participating, and they're all actively taking some type of leadership role within their workplace. And I think, it not only makes our organization stronger, but given what's happening in the current administration, we need more people. We need more leaders. We need more activists to be able to draw from. And this is really the way in which our organization has been able to do that. It's also allowed me to go to school full-time. So that brings me to how I ended up at Presidio. I first learned about it through the New York Times article, The Place to Come to Change the World. So I'd always wanted to go to graduate school, but it didn't really seem feasible for a number of reasons. But I was able to connect with an alumni, and we had lunch, and I was immediately sold. I completed the application and was getting ready to attend very quickly. It was a short span of time. A lot of the fear and insecurity I had about whether or not I could hack it or whether or not I belonged was really helped by the incredible community that is Presidio. And I feel so fortunate for the time that I've been here, and I'm really excited for the remaining time that I have left. now to talk a little bit about the incredible organizing and social justice work that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of since I've been here. Just PGS, which is a working group, Justice and Social Transformation. The mission is to identify and dismantle barriers to collective liberation in our curriculum, our culture, and our community. And it was started by a couple of amazing students, Avi and Tiffany, and also a faculty member, Steve Crane. Myself and others joined that working group. We've sponsored a few events. One of them was a visioning exercise that was really to talk about the creative and artistic form, and make sure that people were a part of the conversation when we're talking about sustainability. Moving forward, our focus is a strategic plan, and really to make sure, again, that social justice is atop of the priority in a conversation in the community. At the end of last semester, there were students that were interested in participating in the Women's March. The date of the march conflicted with residency, so there was some challenges figuring out the logistics of that. I became involved when one of the students was passing a petition in class, and I got involved right away. I want to recognize that it was really the vision of Sarah Lurpart, who's actually in the audience, and she helped organize and kind of lead the organizing efforts. I also want to acknowledge the other folks whose labor made this possible. The delegation committee had Sarah, Mano, Sasha, Selena, who's here, Megan, Sarah, another Sarah, Emily, and another Sarah. 3 Sarahs. I think it's important to honor and respect that labor. So our initial goal as a delegation committee was to get 20 folks. And, we felt like if each of us could recruit one person, that would be a really strong showing. It was the end of the semester. Students weren't going to actually be in the same place again, and it was during the holidays. So we started individually emailing and social media and calling and texting and every way to contact them that we could. A lot of folks had never been involved in an action before, so it was explaining, what does this look like? What is gonna actually be like if I do this? Faculty and board members signed on to a petition. We got 70% of them to sign on. President Mark Schulman and board chair Suzanne Farver personally sponsored us. And in the end, we were able to turn out over 90 people. So we completely blew our goal out of the water. And I think what it really shows is how powerful and how brilliant we can be when we really work together as a community.
Awesome. Great story. Yeah. Love how your leadership at work and at school, they're almost like seamlessly, combining and flowing. It's amazing. And yeah, the collective action leading to collective impact, I think is a really important point. I'm going to give you the same horrible parameters of 90 seconds. You mentioned the Women's March, which I think was one of the very few high points in a very dark January. How do you see us sustaining the momentum of that what was an incredible day?
Yeah. I think specific to what's happening at Presidio, some of the folks that were a part of that planning committee have put together a small group to keep the momentum going. So we'll be organizing precinct walking and phone banking and potentially some lobbying, panel as well, but just small ways in which we can get people involved and active so that they don't forget. Not that you can forget.
Mm-hmm. Great. I know we're a little over. We've got some time for Q&A, yeah? Okay. So I want to pose a question to any and all of you here, but then I would like to open this up to get a discussion going for a little while. So start thinking about those burning questions you have, and we have a mic to roam around the room. But yeah, Andrea, you started touching on it, right? And I think the elephant in the room, and it seems like all of the conversations I've had in the last 2 to 4 months is, the federal realities and how it's affecting our lives, from our personal lives to our work lives to our school lives. And timely today, right, with the signing of the promoting energy independence and economic growth executive order, right? Setting back, a solid decade of our climate work, and the hits keep coming. So, it's easy to peg the negatives that are coming out of our new, domestic realities. But I'd like to pose the question to you all: how has this new reality affected your work, your thinking, and can we find any opportunities, right? Any way that we can sort of leverage this work and continue to move towards this impact, this collective impact? So I'll just open it up to anyone who wants to take this on.
I'm happy to start.
Yeah, Desiree.
So this is definitely, working in government. It's been sort of an omnipresent reality for us, but it's interesting working for local government as opposed to the federal level. And our sense has been that, my department in particular, since 2009 has undergone budget cuts every single year, which has been incredibly tragic and devastating every single time it happens. But what's happened as a result of that is that we've become incredibly scrappy, right? We're mission driven, and it's interesting to have a department agency run more like a nonprofit than actual government in trying to be, and I think that's a really good thing. I think it's why we want nonprofits to run like businesses, right? To think innovative and entrepreneurially. And when you think entrepreneurially, you have to think outside of the box. You have to think about what are new partnerships, what are new ways of doing business and getting things done. And I think at the local level, we happen to be more nimble in our ability to do that. And I think we have a track record of success in all of the climate work we've done. And now moving forward in racial equity work, it actually expands our network of people to work with so much further. And so I think that I'm actually, despite the circumstances, and I know it's still early, right? And there could be things that we just can't predict, right? I mean, the recent news about the Clean Power Plant, like we just keep getting these hits of, I think the philosophy that we're striving for is taking a hit. We are not moving from what we care about. In fact, we have become stronger in our desire to articulate that and to move that out, particularly around social justice and climate change. And so it's been sort of an interesting thing to see, in California. I think in some ways we look at California too as these models of these statements and these articulations, but not just that, but policy. How can we change our policy to really back up what we're saying? So I'm pretty excited about what I'm seeing despite what's been going on. And it's actually been, I think, therapeutic for me to be in that environment, to know that local government wants to keep doing what it's doing and do whatever it can. If it needs to be independent, it's going to find ways to move that forward. But time will tell. For now, I'm pretty happy.
Nice. Good framing. Yeah, we hear from our international cities that they're always amazed by the U.S. cities' ability to be entrepreneurial, despite lack of leadership at the federal level that we've seen for a long time, frankly. David, Andrea.
So I would start by saying that incompetence is our friend. That the new folks that have come in don't really have a clue what they're doing. And our political leadership right now in the executive branch is an inch deep. Basically, we're, what are we, almost 80 days in or something like that? And 70 days? I don't know. Seems like a lot longer.
How many hours is that?
Right. And right now there's cabinet secretaries. There's not even assistant secretaries. And the real work in the executive branch is done at the deputy assistant secretary level, classic DC acronym, the DASs, because they're the ones that sort of directly liaise with the career staffers and actually do the work of the federal government, or at least of the executive branch. Not only do we not have any DASs in place yet, we don't even have any assistant administrators. We have no secretary of the Army. We have no secretary of the Navy. Because they're requiring these crazy loyalty pledges, and you can't have said anything negative about Donald Trump in the last basically your entire life. And so all of this is, while a little bit scary from a purely the health of our democracy standpoint, is actually good for people who care about progressive things and don't want to see them do all these really horrible things that they've stated that they're going to do. And the reality is they seem to be pretty, at least 68 days or whatever, they seem to be pretty incompetent so far. Another example of this manifesting itself is that they have basically dismantled CEQ, the Council on Environmental Quality, which is that White House component that oversees natural resource policies. And regardless of your ideology and sort of where you come down on conservation or liquidation of our natural resources, CEQ plays a really important role within the federal bureaucracy. They're basically the air traffic controller of federal natural resource policy. Why do you need that air traffic controller? It's because you have the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is within the Department of Commerce. The Fish and Wildlife Service and National Park Service and Bureau of Land Management are within the Department of the Interior. The Forest Service, Natural Resources Conservation Service within the Department of Agriculture. You even have the Army Corps of Engineers, which oversees water infrastructure within the Pentagon. You need that air traffic controller, and by dismantling CEQ, it's going to make it really hard for them to actually enact their policies. Compare that to George W. Bush. The George W. Bush administration, no friend of the environment, they staffed up CEQ with all these people from the American Petroleum Institute and the National Association of Home Builders and, the American Enterprise Institute and the Heritage Foundation, Cato Institute, etc. And so they were able to actually dismantle more effectively our strong natural resource laws, which this administration won't be able to do as effectively. Basically, I'm hoping that it's going to take them 3.5 years to figure out how to turn the lights on, and it seems like that's sort of where they're going. I would say, this is a pretty loaded question, but I would say that in terms of the EO that you mentioned, the executive order just today, it's almost more symbolic than it is substantive. And the reason why is because they can dismantle the Clean Power Plan. The reality is there are larger macroeconomic forces at work that will prevent coal from coming back, which is really good for people who care about the environment. The thing that's probably going to take the biggest hit is the nuclear industry. They'll become cost non-competitive, but wind and solar is already there. Natural gas, because of the fracking revolution, is going to outcompete coal. Coal's not coming back. So you can do whatever you want with the Clean Power Plan. It's not going to have a supremely substantive impact on our carbon emissions as a country. But symbolism is really important. So it is a centerpiece of our national sort of agenda to reduce our carbon emissions and what we showed the world, how we showed the world that we were really serious about reducing our collective carbon emissions when we went to Paris. And by getting rid of the Clean Power Plan, it's going to send a very bad signal to China and India and Brazil and Indonesia and Russia that we are no longer serious about enacting our about trying to reach our climate goals under the Paris Accord, and as 25%, as an emitter of 25% of the world's carbon emissions, that the leaders of these countries are going to say, if the U.S. isn't doing it, then why should we? So from our own internal carbon emissions standpoint, not that important. From a symbolic standpoint, a political standpoint, it's actually really damaging. I don't think that was very helpful.
Wow. Insight from inside the Beltway, very helpful indeed. Yeah.
I will say one more thing is that the CAFE standards, the fact that California just said that they're going to uphold the CAFE standard, the corporate average fuel economy standards, fuel efficiency for cars. The fact that California is going to do that is amazing. We all kind of knew that was going to happen, but the fact that they officially announced it and said that they will uphold those standards, because the reality is Ford and GM and Toyota, they don't want to sell two different kinds of cars into the North American market. Everyone's nodding their heads, so you already all know this. But yeah, so the fact that California is doing it means that regardless of what the White House does with the CAFE standards, we're still going in that direction. And that, quite honestly, is probably the most substantive thing that the last administration did for reducing our collective carbon emissions.
Okay. Cities and nimble actors, the city-state pairing. Incompetence is our friend and the market forces so far, right? Yeah, this is a good story we're building. I like it.
Sorry, just to jump in one more
quick
thing.
last
Bureaucracy is also our friend right now.
Yes.
as someone who wanted to really push forward really aggressive environmental policies and spent the last year doing it, a year is not really enough time to get these massive, bureaucracies to move, whether it's the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, what if Forest Service. So the bureaucracy is bad when you have a very progressive administration that wants to do things that you want to see. Bureaucracy is really good when because you've got all these career staffers all over the federal family that are not going to they're going to see all these directives coming down, and they're going to drag their heels and all this kind of stuff because it doesn't sort of they recognize that just because this is what their political leadership is telling them to do, that it's really bad for the country, and so they will drag their heels. And yeah, that's good.
5 minutes. Okay. Quickly, Andrea, I would love to give you some space, and then I want to hear your voice quickly. Selena will go around with the microphone. So raise your hand if you have a question in the meantime. And
So just real quick, I think one of the things that organized labor has not done, some places do it well, some places don't do it as well, but really engaging and continuing to build with their members. So I think this forces us to really kind of branch out and communicate and build and organize in the way that we should be doing. I think that's one of the major silver linings. The other one is labor has not done a very good job at working with the community, working with racial justice organizations, and really taking a strong stance on social justice. And I think now is the opportunity, is the responsibility to do it differently. And I think it's happening in some places, and I'm hopeful that it'll happen more.
awesome. Thank you, Andrea. Love to hear from you. I think we have time for at least one final burning question before we go up. Let's make it two. We'll go Saskia and then John in the back.
It's on. Hello. Hi. Saskia, C4 alumni from Presidio. So given you're talking about the impact that you can have through government and what's happening, we all did MBAs or MPAs. In some ways, you could say that this is an opportunity now, because if regulation is kind of out, now it's really the business case for doing something. And a lot of companies make the excuse that, they're waiting for regulation to come, they don't want to do something because there might be a price on carbon. So isn't this really our moment as business leaders to go to zero?
I'd say yes. I would say yes. I mean, I think all the work, Portland's known for being a leading city on climate change, action to reduce carbon emissions. We didn't get there because of the moral case for carbon emission reduction. We got there because of the business case. And now we've integrated this work on racial equity. We're not doing this only because of the moral case. We're also doing it because of the business case. There's demographic change happening across the country. It's happening in our major cities. We have more and more folks of color in our cities. And so long term, what we're seeing is if we have lack of investment in, and I'm not just talking about climate, but really in the social side of it, if we continue to have poor investment into communities of color and low-income folks, the next 25 years are not going to be good for a city's economy, right? So we have to change the way that we're doing our work, the way that we're extending benefits and opportunity to all communities, right? So it is now for Portland, we see the business case, and this is why I think the city is so tied to doing this work, because we see that the city's only way to prosperity is by addressing racial equity. Now that was what was profound about the city of Portland, right? They're now saying that it is intrinsic to what we have to do as a city, and if we can't get it right, we will fail. Right? And so our job is also to share that business case with local businesses who are actually already there, because their folks are leaving the city, right? Because they can't retain people of color because it's not a good city for people of color, right? So they're leaving. So businesses are like, yeah, get on board with this, right? Because they see the bottom line, they see the profit that can be made. So transitioning to the carbon case, absolutely, right? Same thing, right? So making this business case is absolutely the opportunity. I think it goes back to this entrepreneurial thinking in all sectors.
John and then Nicole, and then I think we're going to close it, but then go upstairs and continue the conversation.
I need microphones. So in Presidio, we talk a lot throughout all our courses about how we use points of leverage in system synergy and how we engage with stakeholders. And among the three of you, are on various sides of that equation, either the stakeholders, activists, or bureaucracy, processing feedback from the stakeholder of the city, looking at input from its constituents. So can you each give me something that I can do as just an individual to add my voice in a way that advances that as a point of leverage? And there's a lot of talk about marches, but we all know signing a petition on Facebook, what does that really get? So what are effective points of leverage you can give us to take out of here to help advance what we're doing?
Do you want to go?
Go first.
So I would say one thing is that a vocal minority will win out over a silent majority every time. Just look at gun control legislation in this country. You have overwhelming majorities that support background checks and support getting AR-15s off the streets, and yet the NRA whips up their members and they make 1 million phone calls anytime any bill is proposed in Congress, and everyone freaks out. Nothing happens on gun control. And so what that means is that picking up the phone and calling, actually making a phone call to your elected representative is incredibly impactful. It sounds like I almost said Barbara Boxer, but Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein, and I mean a lot of us probably live in Pelosi's district or Barbara Lee's district or Jackie Spears' district, so they probably already agree with you on a lot of things anyway. But call up some representatives in the Central Valley that sit in swing districts, and say this is something I'm really passionate about, and that'll actually get folks' attention. And then this is something totally random, but we in this generation expect, and by we I mean I'm an early millennial, I guess, but in the internet age, more and more of us expect to get things for free, and the things that are absolutely critical to a healthy and functioning democracy is a really strong fourth estate. And you can't have free investigative journalism. It just doesn't work. So a little bit out of left field, but I would urge people to buy a subscription to the New York Times, buy a subscription to the Washington Post, Vox Media, ProPublica. It sounds random, but it's actually, consider it like a donation to a nonprofit that you really care about, because these are scary times in DC, and we need the investigative journalism and the really expensive journalism endeavors for things to persist.
Andrea, and then we'll go to Nicole's
Sure.
question.
I think all of it matters. I think there's so many different ways, whether it be going to a community meeting, neighborhood meeting, a council meeting. I do think marches matter. I don't think that's the organizing. I don't think it's enough, but I think those are pieces that fit in, that are important. Calls, like you said, and doing those regularly. There's easy ways going online. They have 5 calls a day. There's lots of different systems that allow you to make calls from home. If you have access to money, donate, and donate to local organizations that are doing great work. There's incredible ones. There's here in the Bay Area, there's the Arab Resource Organizing Committee. They were doing great work around the ban. La Raza Centro de Legal. But donate to organizations that are small organizations that need money, not that will literally shape what kind of work that happens. So make those kind of donations.
Last word before we head up.
To build off of David, I read yesterday there's an app that lets you record a message and send it to your, elected official in off hours time when the lines are not busy. That makes me hopeful. Like, people are spending their extra hours working on stuff like that. Anyway, I spent a lot of time thinking about what are the skills for the future? What are the competencies for the next 20 years? And we're at a really interesting transition moment as a globe, as a country, as a set of institutions. So reflecting on your education, what should we do more of and what's missing in terms of the kind of skills and competencies that we should be inventing as an educational institution?
Desiree, you look like you're
Yeah,
ready.
I do. Because I think we need core competencies around institutional racism. And I think in the work that I do, I see institutional racism and understanding institutional racism as a professional competency. And in government, it should be like the required orientation because it's actually the history of government. And so when people who are trying to facilitate this change run up against these barriers, particularly working and trying to engage with communities, and they're like, I don't know how that, it's because of institutional racism. And so I think that there is a professional competency in there that we're not teaching in schools, we're not teaching from K-12, not in the graduate level or the undergraduate level. And I think that is the professional competency of the future and the change that we need to actually make. And the reason why I see it as a professional competency is because it allows you to see how this system is functioning. It allows you to see this cost benefit, this equation that was created on who gets and who doesn't. And that we perpetuate it, and we perpetuate it unknowingly unless you understand that that was the design. So I think it absolutely should be yes, like I think, and that was helpful at BGI when we did social justice. It wasn't to the degree that I think it could be, and I would love to see an advanced course and basic course on institutional racism and how that impacts society. I think that is what prevents us from actually moving forward on so many different levels, on a community-wide and government-wide, even in business. And so, yes, that's... You're gonna lead it, right? I do it every day.
Yeah, David.
I wanted to just actually build off that. I saw someone have it was, one of these cloth handbags that you get at the grocery store, and on the side it said, "Carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man." And I thought that was just, it's so right. I mean, the reality is as a white guy in Washington, D.C., and especially after, being in the White House for a few weeks or a few months and starting to feel more sort of, getting my sea legs under me, I would go into these meetings and I would catch myself like, in these power poses, like during these meetings with my hands up like this and just like not being afraid to sort of, while someone's sort of pitching me an idea, policy idea, just, interrupting them and really drilling down. Okay, well, what about this problem? What about this problem? Have you thought about this? And there's a level of confidence that's required to do that. I mean, obviously you got to be tactful with it, but that's sort of just because I'm a white guy in America. That's almost like I've just been raised to almost have that kind of confidence. But I can see where that is more challenging for people that don't look like me in meetings. Oftentimes in sort of white collar meetings, in corporate meetings, in government meetings, whatever it is. And so just go into these meetings pretending you're a white guy who's basically okay with just like, asserting yourself and just like taking over a room. Obviously doing it tactfully, but yeah, I would say confidence is one of those soft skills that is so incredibly important in any meeting, any environment, professional or otherwise.
Okay. Desiree is trying to figure out how that fits in the curriculum, I can see, but okay, last word to Andrea.
I think exactly what Desiree said. 100% agree with everything she said, so nothing to add on.
Slam dunk.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, sad news is this part is over. The good news is we're going upstairs to the 4th floor, elevators or stairs, some drinks, some hors d'oeuvres. These amazing panelists are going to be there to answer further questions. Huge round of applause.